Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on phage technology titled A Breakthrough Microbiome-Based Approach to Acne. I'm so happy to have you here. My name is Dr. Varma. You can call me Yug. I'm the founder and CSO of Phyla. And with me today is Dr. Lisa Akintilo. She's a board-certified dermatologist, a fellowship-trained cosmetic surgeon, and assistant professor at NYU Langone. It's so great to have you, Lisa. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for such a fun discussion we're going to have about phyla. Mhm.
My background is that I've been studying the microbiome and doing research in it for the last 15 years, both in academic and applied setting. And when I think of the microbiome, I think of it as a rainforest. This rainforest is invisible because its trees are made out of bacteria, fungi, and viruses. And together, these microbes form a community that lives inside our body. They perform so many functions and they protect our body in so many ways. And it is actually considered the newest organ of the body. Now, obviously, we have a gut microbiome, an oral microbiome, a skin microbiome, one for pretty much every surface of our body. But when we're healthy, although our microbiomes may look different from each other, they share one particular trait in that they are in balance, right? So if you think of a rainforest where all the species are living in harmony and in, respectful ecology, that's exactly what's happening with our microbiome as well. Now, when we look at the skin specifically, but this is applicable to different microbiomes as well. But on the skin, let's say you have a chronic bacterial disease, such as acne, such as eczema. What happens is one bacteria overgrows out of balance and causes a dysbiosis. And this results in the immune system picking up on it, sending out inflammation to combat it, as well as, certain barrier defects may be at play. But essentially, you go from a state of a balanced microbiome and health to an imbalanced or dysbiotic microbiome when you are sick. And so knowing this, right, and knowing all the insights that microbiome research has given us over the years, we understand that if we're in a dysbiotic state, then getting back to that symbiotic or balanced state is imperative for us to be healthy again. Now, I'm going to focus for this presentation on acne and the microbiome. And the central player in acne on our skin is Cutibacterium acnes. This used to be called Propionibacterium acnes, but in the 2010s, there was a nomenclature change, and now it's called C. acnes. C. acnes is an anaerobic bacteria. It lives deep within the pilosebaceous unit at the bottom of the pore, and it lives on the sebum. The fatty acids in the sebum are its primary carbon source. So it's really well adapted to live in the follicle. Now, although C. acnes is all over our body, it's particularly abundant in our sebaceous microbiome, which is the microbiome of our face, our upper chest, and our back. And coincidentally, that's where acne occurs as well. You don't get it in your knee or your torso, you get it in those areas. Further, C. acnes only colonizes in a major way at puberty. And so, for example, you don't see a lot of 6 or 8-year-olds with acne. And that's because at puberty, the hormonal changes result in the deepening of the pore, the production of more sebum, and these are ideal conditions for the C. acnes to grow and multiply. And when they overgrow, they cause acne. Now, the classic four-step acne pathogenesis pathway is obviously well known to all of us. But I just want to highlight how this also encourages C. acnes overgrowth. So it starts with hyperkeratinization, which results in the closing of the pore and the creation of an anaerobic environment, followed by increased sebum production, which is food for the bacteria. And then this results in an accumulation and overgrowth of C. acnes, which through many very well understood molecular mechanisms, indirectly and directly causes a lot of inflammation. Now, obviously, C. acnes growth is not the only part of acne. Acne is a multifactorial complex disease, and hormones are a big part of it, right? And hormones have a major effect on sebum production, both from at puberty when you have that hormonal flush, and that causes a huge number of changes, but also with hormonal acne, with adult acne, where the hormonal cycle dictates how much sebum production is going on. And that's why when sebum production increases, C. acnes overgrowth happens, and that cycle repeats. With diet, Obviously, diet is not a trigger for all kinds of acne, but when you do have a dietary trigger, whether it's spicy or oily foods or chocolate or whatever, these foods trigger an difference in sebum production and sebum quality, and this feeds the bacteria as well. Genetics is pretty easy to understand. People's pore sizes are different. People's, oily or dry skin are different. And this drives differential C. acnes growth. And finally, with stress, when you're sweating, when you're producing a lot of sebum, that encourages C. acnes growth as well. Now, the fact that C. acnes growth is a central part of acne is reflected in the fact that all or almost all acne actives are antibacterial in nature. Obviously, benzoyl peroxide is a strong oxidant, produces reactive oxygen species that are particularly deadly to an anaerobic bacterium. Antibiotics, it's pretty self-explanatory. They also have a mild anti-inflammatory effect. And retinoids target bacteria, especially C. acnes, by sebum production and anti-keratolytic action. And it's been shown that they actually differentially reduce C. acnes levels in a series of papers from the 80s. Now, Dr. Akintilo, you have a lot of experience with this kind of prescription medication. Would love to get your insights into what you see with, when prescribing these medications to your patients.
Of course. So, as you mentioned earlier on in the talk, it is very important that we keep our microbiome in balance. And unfortunately, a lot of the medications that we're trained to reach for acne lead to an imbalance in the microbiome. And I think that's something that now we've learned exists on a cellular level, but our patients have told us in our clinics that, they can't really take antibiotics like doxycycline as a common culprit because it messes with their stomach. They get stomach upset, they get yeast infections. Some patients are not able to tolerate use of retinoids because it's too irritating. Their skin becomes really inflamed and sensitive. So a lot of us have had these experiences, and although they're tried and true, they do work. Some patients are just not good candidates. And one last point about antibiotics as a whole is that in the house of medicine, we're really trying to stay away from antibiotics. There's been a huge push about antibiotic stewardship and trying to minimize its use if absolutely not needed. So it is something that can be a challenge in the clinical practice for sure.
Yeah, and I want to echo that. I think the stats are that dermatologists prescribe antibiotics they're the specialty that prescribes antibiotics at a pretty high rate, and it is because it is something that's in your toolbox for acne. As antibiotic resistance levels increase, that becomes a particular concern for everybody, including dermatologists. But I want to highlight something you said and say that these products kill good and bad bacteria indiscriminately, right? And so I want to highlight the effect they have on the microbiome. The microbiome is, again, this layer that protects us and keeps us healthy. And when we use these products, particularly repeatedly, we are depleting or thinning out the microbiome, right? Think of it as if acne is caused by an invasive species in your protective rainforest, we are setting fire to this rainforest to try and get rid of the invasive species instead of going into the forest and just picking out the weeds and the invasive species and removing it. So, instead of setting fire to our microbiome every day, which results often in, you take a course of medication, you stop it, and then if you have a relapse, what's happening is your microbiome is not sort of resilient enough to resist another round of C. acnes overgrowth, and that's when you get that relapse. Instead, is there a way that we can preserve the microbiome and actually make it stronger and more resilient? So, in that sense, can we not set fire to our microbiome, not set fire to our protective rainforest, and just eliminate or reduce C. acnes overgrowth in a very targeted way without destroying the beneficial bacteria on our skin? And our approach has been to do precise microbiome editing through phages that are highly selective for acne. So as I just said, phages, what are phages? Phages is short for bacteriophages. Bacteriophages are harmless viruses that target and kill bacteria. They're natural and they're everywhere in nature. They're in seawater, they're in soil, and there's billions of phages on our skin, in our body, every single day. Now, they're very harmless. They pretty much don't interact with human cells too much, but they are nature's best killer of bacteria. And their second superpower is that they're highly specific for their host. This means that a C. acnes phage can only kill C. acnes and not C. granulosum, C. avidum, any other, closely related cousin of C. acnes. And it's been shown that C. acnes phages are highly abundant on healthy skin, but are mostly deficient or even absent on acne skin. So we asked ourselves, can we use phages to precisely edit the microbiome, not cause collateral damage and hopefully bypass all the side effects and use them as a clinically useful tool to interrogate acne? Now, high microbiome diversity has been linked to long-term skin health. In other words, people with healthy skin are known to have higher diversity than people with acne. And a study was done in 2016 to do ultra deep metagenomic shotgun sequencing of healthy skin and acne skin to look for any kind of systemic differences between them. The only differences that they found was that healthy skin had a high number of phages in them, as shown in these orange bars. Over here is the healthy level of phages, and over here is the acne level of phages. And they found that acne skin is very deficient in phages, pretty remarkably so. So we asked ourselves, is it possible to take these phages, put them in a bottle, and apply them to acne skin, which is deficient in these? The phages would target and kill the C. acnes, and could that result in the amelioration of acne symptoms? So we did a lot of lead discovery, characterization, formulation. This was supported by UCSF and the NIH, and we ended up with a product that we could then go into the clinic with and study the use of phages in the context of acne. So we conducted an 8-week trial on 90 patients, both men and women, ages 12 to 35. We used an independent third-party lab and performed this in a double-blinded and placebo-controlled way. We recruited Fitzpatrick skin types 1 to 6. And Dr. Akintilo, you see a lot of these trials. Would love for you to give us your reflection on the trial design and the duration of the trial.
Of course, yes. So there are two things I want to really highlight to our listeners to this webinar this evening for me on the East Coast. The first is that the study lasted 8 weeks, which for those of us who read a lot of these trials, especially for acne, is definitely on the shorter side. Most acne studies are 12 weeks or even up to 32 weeks. But I think once we get to the findings and the results, it's really amazing that the results were even detected only at 8 weeks. It only took 2 months for subjects to see the benefits of these products. So that's amazing in and of itself. The other thing I wanted to highlight was the inclusion of different subjects in the study as well. So there were both men and women. They had a wide spectrum of ages. I love that they included the peak kind of acne ages, so adolescents, young adults, and also the fact that all skin types were included, I think cannot be understated. As a whole, again, in medicine and dermatology especially, we're really trying to make sure that we're very inclusive in our recruitment because, as we know, skin conditions manifest differently in different kinds of skin, and patients that we potentially are recommending some of these products for are of all different skin types. So I think it's really commendable that the whole Phyla team was really able to recruit and include all these different skin types from the get-go. So that was really nice to see.
Amazing. Thanks, Dr. Cantillo. And so, when we ran this trial, we asked 4 basic questions. Obviously, safety is number 1. That's really important for us. The second was, can phages reduce C. acnes on the skin? Because we see them kill C. acnes very effectively in the lab. Now, the next question was that, does the C. acnes reduction result in acne improvement? Can we correlate those two? Because that gives us a sort of inkling of the mechanism. And finally, what does phage use have, the effect have? What is the effect of phage use on the microbiome? Does it recalibrate the microbiome? And what are the effects? And so this is just a consort flow chart of the trial itself. We started with 103 males and females. After 13 clinical exclusions, we ended up with 90 patients that were randomized into 3 groups. One was placebo, where so every participant got a cleanser and a serum. In the placebo group, we had a vehicle cleanser and a vehicle serum. In the phage group, we had a vehicle cleanser and a phage serum. And in the third group, we decided to include salicylic acid 2% in the cleanser because it's a known anti-acne ingredient with a known MOA. And so we were hoping that its interaction with phage could give us a clue or more insight into phage mechanism. And so for this group, we had a 2% sal acid cleanser and a phage serum. Now, I'm going to summarize the trial findings, and then after this, I'm going to focus on the data, comparing the data between the placebo and phage for the sake of brevity and time. In terms of safety, of the 64 patients that were exposed to phage treatment, only one case of mild exfoliation was reported. It resolved quickly by the next clinic visit in 4 weeks. And in terms of efficacy, the phage arm recorded the highest treatment efficacy, which was 57% response, followed by placebo and phage plus sal acid. In terms of mechanism, the phage group did show a lowering of C. acnes levels, which was very validating in terms of the MOA, whereas placebo C. acnes levels went up and phage plus sal acid levels also did not go down. In terms of microbiome diversity, we saw a really interesting phenomenon where the phage group saw a significant increase in diversity compared to placebo or phage plus sal acid. And I'm sure you're seeing this pattern now where the phage plus sal acid, 2%, did not perform as well as the phage alone, which tells us, A, that the phage alone is, working to cure acne. But the second point was that we realized that the sal acid MOA is actually orthogonal to the phage. So sal acid is an antikeratolytic. It opens up the pore, floods it with oxygen, and as a result, the C. acnes, which is anaerobic, stops growing. Now, phages need an actively dividing C. acnes in order to infect it and continue its life cycle. And so adding high amounts of sal acid was really sort of halting that march of the phage into the pore. And so I'll share with you a little later how we've solved that problem in formulation. But in conclusion, we found that the phage alone, phage treatment, works to reduce C. acnes level, which results in an improvement in acne and an increase of microbiome diversity. And although this pilot study had a limited N, we are seeing an efficacy signal from the phage arm in 8 short weeks. So now onto the data. First, we're looking at the acne improvement in the phage arm. So from baseline to week 8, with just phage treatment, we see a significant improvement in acne based on the IGA scores with a p-value of 0.002. And in terms of the before-afters, here's just a sample from that trial. We see that in 8 weeks, we are seeing a good improvement. Obviously, it's not completely gone, but there's a good amount of improvement in that time. The next question we asked was, what is the mechanism, right? And as a cohort in the phage group, we did see in figure A, you can see that there is a significant reduction in C. acnes levels. It may look relatively small, but what it's telling us is that the C. acnes overgrowth beyond a certain threshold elicits inflammation. And if you can just push it below that threshold, then you can see quite a remarkable improvement in acne. Also, because this is such a targeted treatment, it points to the fact that you can actually do this without causing collateral damage. And so dryness, irritation, redness isn't a given when you're using efficacious acne products. In figure B, we actually looked at the female cohort in the placebo and phage group, and we broke them out in responders and non-responders. So non-responders are people whose acne or IGA did not get better, and the responders are those whose acne or IGA lowered during the course of the trial. And firstly, you see that in terms of the placebo responders versus phage responders, so you've got an apple-to-apple correlation, we are seeing that in the phage group, we see a reduction in C. acnes, whereas in the placebo group, we don't, which means that the phage are finding their target and they are doing what we expected them to do. What's really interesting is if you look at the phage group, non-responders versus responders, so the light green versus the dark green in figure B, we see that when we see an acne improvement for the responders, we see a decrease in C. acnes level. And in the non-responders, when we don't see an improvement in acne, you don't see a reduction in C. acnes levels. This indicates that this is the first emergent causal link between C. acnes, the bacterium, and acne. And although we've known that the bacteria is involved in the disease for over 100 years, we've never actually had a modality where we could just knock down the one kind of bacteria and observe its clinical effect. So I think that's a pretty significant finding. Finally, we looked at the microbiome diversity before and after the intervention. And so in figure A, you see that in the phage group, there was an increase in microbiome diversity from baseline to week 8, which we did not see in the placebo group. And this was a statistically significant finding. In figure B, we took the female responders from placebo and phage groups, and we looked at their microbiome diversity before and after. We just plotted before after. And in the placebo group in black, you can see that their microbiome diversity either remained the same or it decreased. Whereas in the phage group, their microbiome diversity almost uniformly increased, which is a pretty interesting and striking finding. And I just want to zoom in on one of the patients in our trial to show you how dramatic phage use can be on the microbiome and diversity. So on the left pie chart is this patient's before sort of microbial makeup. 75% or 3 out of 4 bacteria on their face were C. acnes in dark green. And after 8 weeks of phage application, this level had dropped by almost half. And that allowed a large bloom in microbiome diversity of the non-C. acnes and staphylococci, et cetera. Now, we know that people with healthy skin have higher microbiome diversity than people with acne. But another observation is, although we get acne at the rate of 85% of the population worldwide, there are some human populations where acne is either rare or completely absent. One such example is the Yanomami people in Brazil, but there have also been reports of hunter-gatherer communities in Africa and Asia where acne is extremely rare. The difference between their skin and ours is that their microbiome diversity is really high. And so given that diversity is a very important marker of long-term health, skin health, it's really interesting to see that the phage use can, produce such a dramatic effect. And if we can keep this up and preserve a healthy microbiome, it can have really good effects on our long-term skin health. So that was a lot of science. We learned a lot from this. And as we did the science and we got our clinical results, we put all of those findings into a product. This product is called Phyla. And it is a simple 3-step system that is meant to be minimally formulated with maximum impact. Its simple twice daily routine starts with cleanse. So our cleanser is pH balanced and contains a number of gentle ingredients that can calm irritated skin. Its role is to prepare your skin to receive the phages. The second step contains our secret sauce. It's the black serum bottle, and it contains billions of live active phages. It delivers more than 100 million phages per dose, and it also includes salicylic acid, but only at 0.5%, not 2%. And we actually deliver it in an encapsulated form so that its orthogonal action does not interfere with phage action. Finally, we have the moisturizer because obviously a lot of people with acne have dry, damaged skin. It's a phage-friendly formulation, so it doesn't get in the way of phages acting. It contains 5% niacinamide, which is great for acne scarring and to heal hyperpigmentation due to acne. And it also contains other skin-friendly ingredients like squalane and ceramide that can hydrate the skin without being too heavy. Our products are cruelty-free and vegan, and we, shy away from harmful ingredients in our products. Now, obviously, as you're, hearing this, you're thinking, oh, I can get some quick wins with Phyla with inflammatory acne because so much of inflammatory acne is driven by C. acnes overgrowth. But I also want to highlight the fact that Phyla can be used with other medication, including Accutane and benzoyl peroxide, but it can also be used in non-inflammatory acne with, open and closed comedones, because that's when C. acnes overgrowth is just starting. And if you use Phyla as kind of a maintenance serum or a maintenance product, that can be quite beneficial. Dr. Akintilo, I mean, you've been using Phyla for a little while with your patients. Do you have any pearls to share with us?
Absolutely. So as Dr. Varma said, Phyla can be used on all kinds of acne. In my clinical experience, I do think the best entry point is for those patients with inflammatory acne, those big, tender, painful bumps. The patients who you typically would reach for oral antibiotics like the doxycycline, minocycline, sarecycline, maybe if someone's pregnant, erythromycin or clindamycin, perhaps those patients, this Phyla, shot out of the park. It's perfect. But as Dr. Varma was saying, it also is really good for long-term use as well, because not only do you really calm down the C. acnes, you regulate the microbiome, but it also helps prevent acne before it even starts. So it works as a prevention too. So I love it for my patients as a way to both quickly treat acne, right? The study was only 8 weeks and patients got, or subjects got better, but also it's a way to prevent acne in the long term. So it's safe to use for the long term, as opposed to many of the other medications like oral antibiotics that we use for our patients.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Akintilo. And, since we've launched, we've had over 50,000 customers. And what we've noticed is, although the clinical trial it recruited only subjects with mild to moderate acne, we are seeing great results even with moderate to severe acne, including chest acne, back acne. And because a lot of the inflammation here is driven by C. acnes overgrowth, and other factors like hormones also affect C. acnes overgrowth, the fact that we are able to interrupt that cycle of inflammation is quite significant. And as we started launching this product over the last couple of years, we've had the benefit of working with some dermatologists to just understand, how do they treat acne patients? What are their patients saying to them? How does their practice work? And that's given us a great deal of feedback to learn how our product could fit into this practice and learn from them. And at the start of a lot of these conversations, they would say, "Oh, this is great technology, but how come I've never heard about this before? I knew about phages maybe from med school or from my textbooks or my training, but I wasn't aware that this technology was actually being used to build products." And so this is one of the many ways that we're trying to reach out and educate the providers and tell them, "Hey, there's a new tool in your toolbox." Although acne innovation has lagged the innovation of some other indications, that we actually do have something that's cutting edge and that reflects all the learnings that we've had in acne over the last few decades. Dr. Quintillo, I know you've got patients and you've had feedback from your patients regarding Phyla. Do you have anything to share with us?
I do, yes. So I would say number one, my patients who use Phyla love it. It's very easy to use, very easy to integrate into a skincare regimen. It can be easily plugged in either with the existing cleanser and moisturizer that's provided by the company as well, or with their own favorite cleanser and moisturizer as well. With social media, there's all these 12-step regimens that can be quite complicated. So it's really nice that with Phyla, it's very simple. It's just one serum you put on, and then you can immediately apply a moisturizer. It doesn't really cause irritation. The study showed there was one case of mild exfoliation that very quickly resolved, but patients really do very well with it. And another thing to highlight, you mentioned, or maybe I mentioned it briefly with pregnancy, but this product is great for pregnant patients. And as we all know, pregnant patients with acne are really a challenge because we're quite limited in what we can use. But Phyla is safe to use. So it's really nice that we have it for that reason. And, just quickly on a personal note, my younger brother had pretty bad inflammatory acne, which was challenging for him because he couldn't really tolerate oral antibiotics, definitely could not tolerate retinoids, and he's vegan to top it all off. So he had a hard time even finding over-the-counter products. But once he started using Phyla, actually very quickly, I think for him it was around week 4, within a month, he started to notice a decrease in his inflammatory lesions, and he loved that it's vegan, so it works well with his lifestyle. And he definitely feels more confident to say he's the brother of a dermatologist. So that's just one example of how great this line is.
Amazing. Thank you, Dr. Quintillo. And, to date, we've worked with more than 350 providers. They've had the opportunity of having Phyla in their hands, finding out for themselves how effective it can be, and then being glad that they have another tool in their toolbox so that when patients come in, they can offer them this alternative. And at this point, I'm happy to jump into the Q&A and take some questions. But for more information, please visit our HCP page. And you can also reach out to me at my email. My address is yug@phyla.com.